Hello and welcome to another episode of the Brew Hoop Podcast, also known as the Trae Young StinkZ Podcast. Today, as per usual, it's Adam Paris joining you every week, co-managing editor of BrewHoop.com, and I'm joined by the guys, the fellas, Kyle Carr and Riley Feldman. Guys, how are you doing after a crushing loss against the Atlanta Hawks?
Not well, Adam, if I'm being honest. Not nearly as good as Bonzi Colson, who would have ever guessed he would have had this kind of performance in him. But we'll get into that. But not as well as he's doing right now.
I'm a little devastated about the loss, but the universe giveth with a Liverpool last-minute winner, and the universe taketh with the Bucks last-minute loss. So that's just how it be like that sometimes, I guess.
You guys might not be able to hear it in his voice, but we just got Kyle to stop sobbing after like 5 minutes before we hit record about what just happened. So we're taking it pretty tough right now.
I'm going to go bang on the drum again like I did last night.
Yeah, and of course we're talking about the absolutely deflating 136 to 135 overtime loss that the Bucks had at the hands of Bud's former team, the Atlanta Hawks. I don't even know. I guess we'll start with the starting lineup with this one. I was going to say I don't even know where to start with this.
Just read.
Place to start.
I was going to say just read the box score from top to bottom. Every single statistic. Just read it out.
Okay, well let's just start with the fact that today the Milwaukee Bucks and coach Mike Budenholzer decided to start a lineup of Tim Frazier, Sterling Brown, Bonzi Colson, DJ Wilson, and Brook Lopez. Kyle, first reactions when you saw that come across the wire?
I thought it was a joke. I did not think it was real. When Matt Velasquez tweeted that this was the lineup, I was like, no, that can't be it. That's not real. No. And then the Bucks put the graphic on. I was like, what? No. This is a long-running joke. I get that it's April Fool's tomorrow. It's just an early April Fool's joke. Okay, cool, Bucks. No worries. You got me. And then they were actually on the court playing. I was like, this lineup is really going to be what the Bucks throw out there. Okay, sure. If this was Chicago or New York, I'd say this is the most blatant attempt at tanking I've ever seen. And yet this lineup almost won the game. Like, that's the craziest part about it. That lineup had no reason to be competitive at all. And they started off so well.
I honestly couldn't believe it. I was like doing some errands and stuff, so it was getting close to tip-off time, and I hadn't got a chance to pay attention. Then all of a sudden, I saw that Colson was starting, and I had a little case of whiplash in my kitchen, I think, even though I was just standing on my own. Riley, how did you feel when you saw that Bonzi Colson was going to get going here?
You guys can't even imagine the amount of excitement I felt just because I love like random lineups like this, especially late in the season. Like, yeah, you would prefer to have full strength and go for a win anyhow. But if you're not going to have everybody available, you might as well get as weird as possible. And having DJ, Bonzi, Lopez, Frazier, and Brown out there as your starting five is as weird as you could possibly get with who was available. So I was ecstatic, confused. And then they went up 29-9 after like 4 minutes, which is just the craziest thing. It was awesome. Even though it sucks that they lost, I mean, it was an awesome game from start to finish just because it was so weird and so odd and competitive throughout too.
Do we have a nickname yet for Bonzi Colson? I've seen some thrown around on Twitter, I feel like.
No, I see people spell his first name wrong all the time, so maybe he could just be Bonzi without the E. I don't know. We can work around that possibly.
Can I run one by you guys? I ran it by my roommate and he was pretty lukewarm on it.
Okay.
Okay,
all right.
go ahead.
What about the Colsonaissance?
Okay. We'll workshop it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Now I get why he was lukewarm.
Okay, you guys need to look at the post-game graphic. You know how the Bucks always have like who the leaders were in points, rebounds, assists, and steals?
Yeah.
I'm looking at it right now, and Sterling Brown had the most points at 27, and he had 3 steals, but his pulls actually looks normal. Like that looks reasonable. And then you see Bonzi Colson with 16 rebounds, and then Tim Frazier 15 assists, and it looks like they literally just like cut part of it out and photoshopped it on there, like someone did it on Snapchat.
They were not. Whoever the FS Wisconsin or the Bucks media intern is, they were not expecting this at all.
Yeah, they probably walked into work like, okay, ho-hum, maybe Giannis will play. That's fine. Still have Middleton and Bledsoe. Okay. And then probably they probably got this, and they're like, what am I going to do with this?
Here's how I think we transition into talking about the game more at length, because I know we're going to spend at least an hour, maybe 2 on it. Would you guys, would you nickname this game?
2 hours.
Yeah, maybe. would you call this game the Bonzi Colson game, the Tim Frazier game, or the Sterling Brown game? Which of those three would you say is most deserving of having his name enshrined upon this game?
I'd probably still go Bonzi Colson. Just because he was the unlikely story of the game. Besides Tim Frazier not taking a break, I still think it's Bonzi.
Yeah, I agree. Just because this might be the only thing that he'll ever be able to say, like when he's really old, like he'll only be able to say like I had this one game where I played 41 minutes. So I think he should have at least one game where he could call it the Bonzi game.
Adam's surprisingly down on Bonzi's future prospects with the team. That was cold, man.
I did see that Tim Frazier, the Bucks account, tweeted out that he was the first Buck since Monte Ellis in 2013 to have 20 points and 15 assists in a game.
That's really strange. I would have figured like Giannis would have had some crazy, like he got his 20 and then just started feeding everybody. He does that on occasion. That's pretty crazy.
Like Bledsoe even. I can see
that too. Yeah.
Nope, Monte Ellis.
Okay. Okay.
Wow. That is, you know what? Nothing describes this game more than Monte Ellis being the last record holder for something in the Bucks loss.
Guys, I want to talk about how Bonzi Colson looked on the court today. 1 of 9 from 3-point land. 1 of 9 from 3-point land. Really didn't seem like the rock was going to fall for him today much. 4 for 4 from the free throw line, 15 points, 16 rebounds. And wouldn't you guess it, I actually feel pretty bad now. He finished a team high +9 in the plus minus for the day. So I feel pretty bad for making fun of him now. But
look, I'm not saying that Coach Budenholzer needs to go back to the tape and maybe, take some lessons from this. But those 3 minutes where he left Bonzi out at the end, that's where we lost the game. I'm just going to say it.
Dude, obviously I don't think it really matters, but I was watching this game and I was thinking this has to be like if they had won, but this has to be like the game where Coach Bud over beating the Rockets, over beating the Warriors in Golden State, over like destroying the Clippers last week. This has to be the tape that Bud sends in for his Coach of the Year candidacy, right?
Yeah, I think so. Didn't you tweet like before the game or right when the game started this, if he got the win, this would be the ultimate flex or something like that?
Yeah, the dude said, here's what we're going to do, guys. I'm going to take out everyone who's actually like really good and could destroy this Atlanta team. I'm going to have all the super subs play. And then we're also going to run a 2-3 zone for the entirety of 53 minutes. It literally looked like a March Madness game out there. It was like 2 college teams. He was just running zone the whole game. It was like a supersized Syracuse or something. And then
that's why he lost, because zone is for cowards.
Half the points were coming on like back cuts. Like the Bucks were getting back cuts over past the Atlanta Hawks defense. Like that, it was so crazy that this team that this whole game was so helter skelter like that.
This reminds me of when I played like FIFA 18, like FIFA on Xbox, and then you kind of know your players are tired. You just throw out the worst team possible and see if you can still win. This was a prime example of that. I just throw out, the end of the bench, people that you never heard of, guys that are probably created in 2K. And just hope for the best.
I think that's kind of, I agree that you're kind of just hoping for the best. But even then, this is not an super awful Hawks team. Like they've been pretty good as of late. And then I think we should credit Colson and Frazier and Brown and everybody else everybody played decently. Ersan would be maybe the guy I'd circle as not having the greatest game. But like Sterling Brown had the kind of game that we would expect him to have done in like a summer league setting where the offense was flowing through him for like possession after possession. He's, he answered the call, like no fear whatsoever, driving into the lane and getting bucket after bucket to fall and then finding other guys on the perimeter. So I thought he had an awesome game. Like, yes, it's all jokes that Bonzi and Tim Frazier had like really weird stat lines, but Sterling Brown kind of stepping up in 33 minutes and having 27 points and kind of taking the scoring load on. I thought that was super impressive from him.
Yeah, I think that's actually, I mean, yeah, it's fun to joke around about all this stuff, but yeah, I think that's honestly the more important takeaway, especially building off of his last Clippers game, where Sterling Brown had just hit a career high in that game as well. But it certainly seemed like a flashback, just like you said, Riley. I could only think of summer league when he was able to dribble drive, get to the basket, score from the perimeter. He really showed the type of game that I think was the reason why you thought he might have a bit of a breakout season here under Bud too.
Yeah, I think it's I don't know if it's so much because we saw a lot of the flashes last year where it was like, oh, this guy's like defensively, especially is like, okay, this guy's a total nuisance to have to play against. And he was that same way today, especially matched up against Trae Young. Like there are multiple moments where Trae Young would kind of be ISOing or he'd even be trying to just get the ball across half court and Sterling Brown would be right on top of him like, hey, I'm still here. And there were a lot of different possessions where just because of the 2-3 zone, he had to like switch around and keep moving and keep with the ball. And just for him to have the size and the ability to keep up with it and then continue to be effective and then switch over on the other side. And even if it wasn't like ISOing or a position that directly just started in his hands and ended in his hands to continue to facilitate, I think it's just amazing. I think the fact, and I think it was last year when he was selected, it was like, oh, this guy's got like a lot of potential, and to see him kind of realize it has been awesome to watch.
I also think, Kyle, I mean, I think it says a lot about just Bud as a coach that, yeah, you would hope that these guys, when they're getting sort of their chance to shine here, that they really show up and play well. But I mean, this team, they're shorthanded, only had 8 guys today. It's made up of a bunch of guys who are certainly fitting into a role that taking on a lot more of the spotlight than they're used to. And I don't know, I guess in years past, maybe you'd expect some of these guys at the end of the bench or this Bucks team maybe not to step up like this, but the morale is just so high across the board. It seems like these guys were playing, as hard as they could, trying to eke out this win for all the guys who are resting. Meanwhile, like Giannis, Chris, and Bledsoe seem to be getting really hyped whenever Sterling would make a big shot or anything big would go down on the court too.
Yeah, I think it's a sign of what kind of coach Bud is just by empowering those guys. I mean, again, like you mentioned, there's only 8 of them. And, for someone like Sterling Brown or DJ Wilson or Pat Connaughton, they're trying to, make a claim to get either more playing time or play in the playoffs when the rotation gets cut down to 8 before, Mirotic and Brogdon get back. And then you have someone like Bonzi who's playing pretty much for his career, more or less. Like, we don't know if he's going to be brought back next year. He's trying to, make sure that he takes his opportunity and plays his way onto a roster. Like, it's, stuff like that where, those guys wanted to get the win and you can see it on the bench. Like Giannis is going into huddles and clapping and encouraging them. And I think it's just showing that, Bud trusts these guys enough that they can win the game. And, the players in return almost pulling it out and showing that they can do it. So it's definitely a change in morale and change of approach. And I get that it's also back-to-back, which is probably why Bledsoe and Middleton didn't play. But it is a good sign that that's how well things are going this season, that we're in April. And I mean, you still have something to play for in getting the number 1 seed. Like, the magic number is still 2. So you still have the number 1 seed to play for, and you could have played, Giannis and Chris and Bledsoe, just make sure that you get it wrapped up. But, you believe that you guys can get the win, and they almost did. And, seeing a performance that Sterling Brown had, it was great. Seeing, Bonzi Colson get some run is great. Brook Lopez wasn't missing a beat, even though he was pretty much playing with guys that I'm sure he hasn't played with consistently. So it stinks that they lost, but it is an encouraging sign, at least, that, the players, how deep the roster is, like, your end of the bench guys can still compete with other NBA teams.
Well, and I think just kind of hopping on that too, what I thought was interesting as the game kind of developed. I mean, they only had 8 guys to work with, and even while the game was going on, I think Katie George had an update, or like in between a break, she said something along the lines of like, during a timeout, Coach Bud went to Bonzi and, kind of like tried to rewrite like where the 5 blue squares are that they have at the practice facility. Like, okay, I need you here. You shouldn't be running inside. You need to be going to one of these spots. So like, even the fact that his offensive system, he's like, okay, we have like 0 starters. We're going to throw these 5 dudes out there and we're still going to be like really close throughout, or like even blow the doors off Atlanta in the first quarter to get 43 points right out the gate. I think that's a testament to his willingness to like throw new guys in there and like trust them to, if you continue to instruct them and coach them up, they'll get the process. And the fact that the process is so relatively simple offensively that, guys who have never really played with the upper team except for garbage minutes, get 41 minutes, and they're still able to have an impact positively. I think that's that's such a good sign and such a good like check mark next to Bud's resume. Like, he can toss anybody out there and the system will still continue to work, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, you look at the kind of guys who you would expect, the people who are getting regular rotation minutes. Obviously, Sterling Brown had a day, but you'd think a guy like, Brook Lopez had 19 points. He was +6. I mean, he did really well, but a lot of his scoring effort came in that like first quarter and first half when he was just hitting that barrage of threes. Ersan Ilyasova, only 7 points on the day. George Hill does his thing with 18 points, but a lot of these raw counting stats are just going to be really high because the pace was absolutely incredible between these two teams. But I think it said a lot about, you don't have a lot of guys that you would necessarily trust with the ball in their hands. But I think it says a lot, though, that Bud would be like, look, this is Sterling's game to take over. I mean, he had the chance to try and win it at the end of regulation, and he was the one that got them the lead at the very close of OT with the dribble drive to the basket. And really good job of finishing by him. I think that's something that he's really improved on this year. But I mean, doing that as opposed to giving it to George Hill or even like trying to set up a set play. I mean, it was a lot of like, you just set a screen for Sterling and he's going to have to make it himself. I think that says a lot about the trust that he has in Sterling, and hopefully bodes well going into the playoffs.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we'll end up having a discussion probably next week as we get closer to playoffs, given the rotation situation. But I think today and just the way that it ended up playing out was a huge endorsement for Sterling and kind of the role he'll probably end up playing in the postseason, I would guess.
Yeah, it was really too bad that I think it does say something, though, about like maybe a little bit of the rebounding ability of this team. They have a defensive rebounding of 76.6% today, which obviously isn't as high as the Bucks have usually been. But it says a lot that the Hawks were basically able to kind of win the game on like a weird tip thing that Brook Lopez tries to tip it out, but then it ends up in Trae Young's hands. And then at the end of regulation too, that was a shot they couldn't get the rebound, and then Alex Len gets another opportunity to tie the game. And so that was kind of too bad that the game didn't go the Bucks' way today. But any other like interesting, what other like weird, interesting stuff did you guys see today? I tweeted this out during the game, but did anyone else think that Bonzi Colson reminded them of like Jabari Parker's weird
I was
mannerism?
just going to say
I'm going to
that.
say,
Oh
I saw
my
that
God.
spreading.
I had the same exact thought when he was out there. I was like, he's got, I wouldn't say they're like body, like what's the word I'm looking for? Body twins. Like they're not matches per se, but they both have like this really stocky like core and like long limbs. I thought the same exact thing, Adam, that he looked a lot like Jabari Parker.
I did not think that.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I can see where people are getting that idea, but I don't know. It kind of reminded me more of like Sterling when he was in Summer League and he was just like thick and big. It kind of reminded me more like that.
Yeah, I don't know. Like the way Bonzi plays is so odd because he gets the 16 rebounds, and part of that probably is because of Brook Lopez out there like bodying people. And the Hawks, I think what Alex Len had 27 minutes, but they're not like an especially gigantic team, so that helps him out as well. But the fact that his entire like skill set rebounding is like, I'm going to use my really long arms and just hope I can tip it enough to get it free that I'm able to go and get the rebounds. I thought it's just a really strange way to play and definitely a unique aspect that I'm not sure a lot of other players his size, because I think he's only like 6'7". I can't guarantee that, but
I got it up. Yeah, he's 6'6" with a wingspan of 7 foot.
Yeah, that's crazy. So the fact that he's so good at controlling his body and able to get those 16 rebounds, I thought that was impressive. But I thought the same exact thing. I was like, wow, he kind of has like Jabari Parker's body type a little bit. It's interesting.
Yeah, with like I just kind of see like his torso just seems so much thicker than his legs or his arms that just seem to like go sort of spread out. It's like a turtle with a really long wingspan or something.
I'm sure he would love to hear that. We love you, Bonzi.
Oh, Kyle, any other like weird observations from this one?
They took a lot of threes. I know you mentioned the pace of it, but holy hell, they took a lot of threes. I think they took like what 100 and it was over 107 because that was the record. But
it was 116. I got it here. That's
an insane amount of threes, and that kind of showed in the game when Milwaukee just went off to that blistering start. I think they started 4-4 before Atlanta called the timeout, and things are going great in the first quarter. And then they couldn't hit threes while Atlanta was able to hit their threes to trim the lead. And then it kind of just became we're just going to just gun and shoot, which again makes sense with the personnel that both teams had. But but I think it's just so many threes. And I think that showed like how easy a run can happen in the NBA where, 1 minute you're up 20 something. The next minute your lead is only down to 3 just because, hit a couple threes and you're right back in the game. So it was, that was way too many threes for me to count. And I think a lot of them were ill-advised. Like I think Trae Young like chucked one from like 35 before taking over at the end of the game.
Yeah, and the other thing I was just looking at the stats on cleaning the glass that has where the shots came from. So one of the things that stood out to me was Milwaukee just 2 for 12 on corner 3-pointers today. Meanwhile, Atlanta goes 9 for 15 from the corner. So, I mean, that's a pretty stark difference considering that's generally the easiest shot in the game.
The only other note I have besides shout out Bonzi one last time, Sterling Brown. Do you guys remember earlier this season when like it was right at the start of the DJ Wilson renaissance when I think he either found Giannis for like a dunk or he was just on the corner when Giannis dunked and like DJ did this mid-air stomp like celebration on the court of Giannis flushing it home. I thought it was funny at the time, but it seemed like he transferred that energy over to Sterling because there were multiple possessions down the stretch where Sterling would find someone like on that Ersan 3. Sterling was so hyped up, like flying all over the court after Ersan made the 3. I thought that was really cool to watch. So I think the team, even though they lost, they're in a really good place, just like mentally, mindset wise. It's a lot of fun to watch right now.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else. I just want to say real quickly, I guess that the 76.6% defensive rebounding rate isn't that different from the season average, but obviously those offensive rebounds that Atlanta got were critical there. Shout out these guys for going 22 for 23 from the free throw line. I think that's pretty impressive considering it's a lot of guys who typically aren't going to be playing in the game. And then meanwhile, Atlanta goes just 10 for 17. So that really helped them stay in the game. Even amidst all the sloppy play. What did you guys think of the zone scheme? I feel like we've maybe seen like a little bits and pieces of it throughout the year, and obviously it's not working at full capacity. Really, just a few guys who would actually probably actually make it work. I mean, like Tim Frazier and Bonzi Colson obviously won't be in there. So, did you have any takes on how that might have worked? Obviously, it's in its extended run today.
Kyle, do you have it? Yeah, I was going to go
Zone is for cowards. I'm not a fan of zone. It's for cowards. I get the concept of it, and it worked. Like Trae Young did not shoot the ball particularly well when the Bucks ran the zone, but zone is still for cowards.
I don't feel super duper strongly about it. I thought the Hawks were definitely caught off guard from the get-go, but it didn't take them super duper long to kind of adjust their approach to be able to account for it. Like there are a lot of possessions where once they got used to the fact that for whatever reason we were going to run the zone the entire game, they would either do a pass fake or kind of a lot of off-ball movement to sort of get in a position to break it. So I mean, it's fine that they did it. I'm not like mad about it or anything like that, but I'm not sure if it's going to be a viable strategy for anything more than like 2 or 3 possessions in the playoffs just to give another team a different look.
Yeah, so you're okay that Bud tipped his hand here?
Yeah. I'm so mad that I can't believe he revealed our secret weapon this early to the lead. What the hell was he thinking?
I thought it was fascinating that he decided to go with the zone here. And it's interesting that Trae Young went just 5 for 19 when it kind of seems like the zone would be specifically built for Trae Young to succeed if he could just like penetrate easily. And I mean, he had 16 assists on the day, so that's probably part of it too. So yeah, there was a fascinating move by Bud, and maybe just a product of the fact that these guys probably haven't played that many practice minutes together. Not that they practice a ton, but like that, these guys just were able to execute that pretty easily. So.
One more. I'm not sure if anybody else caught this, but there was like a moment in the third quarter where Jim Paschke was like, Marcus, this is one of 6 games this season being broadcast in prime time to India. And like, it felt like a 30-second just dead air moment where Marcus was processing that or like trying to figure out how the hell he was going to respond. And Marcus just like, India? Wow. And I think it's notable that there are going to be millions of people in the Indian subcontinent going to bed tonight thinking that Sterling Brown and Bonzi Colson are some of the best basketball players this planet has. So shout out to all our new Indian listeners. We love you guys. And yeah, that's all I got on that.
Yeah, I think one of the things I laughed at was when Bonzi hit that three, and you can just hear someone just say, "Bro, what?" And I was like, I think that and Riley that moment with Marcus and Jim. I think that is a great description of how to describe that game.
Oh god,
what a week! What a week!
Wow, that was an incredible game. All right, well, let's go back and look at just a little bit at the week that was. You were saying this before we went on, but kind of just wound up being a couple of ho-hum victories despite facing some of the better teams in the Western Conference and the Clippers and the Rockets. So last Thursday, the Bucks win 128-118 against the Clippers. The end score kind of seems closer than how it felt like that game really went. And then the 104-98 victory against the Rockets was the big one there. Guys, I was traveling for work on Thursday, so I still haven't gotten a chance to watch like the first 3 quarters or whatever of that Clippers game. So Riley, I'm going to throw it to you first. What really stood out to you in that Los Angeles win for the Bucks over the Los Angeles?
The Clippers had to play Garrett Temple for 36 minutes, and I think that'll go ahead and wrap up the game summary for you. And I'm glad you no. It was a boat race, but it's like one of those double-edged, like it's impressive because the Clippers have been good all season, obviously, and that's why Doc Rivers is a potential coach of the year candidate. But they were also down a couple of key guys, and they had to run every single guy they had available got minutes, which is super strange. But I'm not sure if you can take away a lot, except for the fact that this game and the Houston Rockets game, as well as that Chris Middleton continues to have I have to pull up his March numbers, but he's had a hell of a run the past couple of weeks, which is super awesome because I was getting a little worried as we were getting closer there. But I'm not sure the Clippers game, besides Giannis like dominating as he usually does, there's not much more to say than Chris Middleton. Good for having another game, and keep it up, sir.
Yeah, Ryan Hollins being on the broadcast was an absolute bleeping bad idea. Yeah, I don't know why it was there. But in seriousness, the Clippers having a really good shooting night, though. They shot the ball really well from 3, and the Bucks were still in control the majority of the game, and a big part of that was just because Chris and Giannis was just a two-headed monster that they were just better than everyone else on the court, and they showed it, and they flexed those muscles. So even when, a couple threes goes the Clippers' way, Middleton can just hit back with a 3, or Giannis just gets a layup or a dunk. And it was kind of just showed like when those two are playing at a high level, that's why, you wonder, okay, you got to pay Chris the max. Like it's kind of the game like that where when he's on, he's on.
Yeah. And so much of it too is like, because I kind of pulled up his numbers, like over the month of March, he's above his season averages in like every single statistical category. I think his like 3-point percentage overall is down a little bit, but he's returned to, I think, the second most numerous, or maybe his first most numerous shot was from 3. And then after that, it was like right around the basket and then that 15 to 19 foot zone. So it's not like he's playing radically differently. It's just as Chris is wont to do, he's just right in the midst of a really good shooting streak, which is, you'll take it because what else are you going to do? But the have it come together at this time when the team needs it most, especially with Giannis having all these kind of ankle issues, which we'll get to Kyle's tape the damn ankle segment next. I just think for everybody who was agonizing over it, and we still have yet to get the playoffs, and we'll have to see how it lasts throughout the playoffs. But the fact that he's kind of come around as of late is, super reassuring, especially at least for me personally, as we head into the playoffs.
Okay, so I'm going to do the sort of like guy who missed a good chunk of the game, but's looking at the box score and something seems really weird to me. So I'm looking at it, and it's like the starters are Giannis is +1, Middleton's +2, Lopez -3, Bledsoe -4, Brown -10. And then you look at the bench, it's like Wilson +8, Ersan +20, Hill and Connaughton +24 and +20 respectively. But meanwhile, like the bench only takes, what is that, 8, like 14 shots total, the entire game. So they end up scoring 13 points, the entire bench does, and yet they were a huge part of that. So did you guys see some sort of part of those guys just filling in around maybe Chris and Giannis specifically that really seemed to key the runs in that game?
Kyle?
I mean, I think it was just one of those where they knew who the hot guy was, and they were both getting open looks. So I think they were just going with the flow of the offense. They were on the court when I feel like Giannis and Chris were on the court, I feel like, a long time, besides, Giannis rolling his ankle because he taped the damn ankles. But yeah, it just seemed like they were just running the flow of the offense, and that flow just, they found Middleton and he was able to hit a shot, or they got Giannis and he was just able to take it to hoop. Like, they were just kind of just like, all right, here you go. If you need us, let us know. Like, we'll shoot this 3, but it seems like you two got this under control.
Yeah, hey, I'll be standing over in the corner just in case. Like, just let me know if you need any help, be honest, but you're good over there. No, I think it's one of those things that, as we talk about almost every single episode, I think the vagaries of individual game plus minuses, like they just happen to have been out there when Giannis and Chris were doing really well, and the whoever was on the floor for the Clippers, not nearly so much. So not sure if you can go ahead and say that George Hill is the surefire answer to what will be a finals winning team, but I mean, I guess what you could say is it's positive that they were out there for such significant minutes and they did lock it up, which is, again, just a testament to how everybody can kind of play a role without having to have the ball run directly through their hands. But I'm not sure if you should say like, oh, this is a lineup that they have to run out to win games.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I'm certainly not trying to say that. I just thought it was an interesting aspect there with the bench clearly taking a back seat and letting Chris Middleton work. All right, well, let's move on to the Rockets game, where Chris Middleton also heaved up a bunch of shots, but had a far worse night from the field. He went just 6 of 23, 1 for 8 from 3. Really couldn't buy a bucket that night, but in that 108-94 victory, it seemed like it was going to be a battle of the MVP candidates in Giannis and Harden. But as most people know already, it was Eric Bledsoe who stole the show. So, Kyle, what was really the standout moment to you from that Bledsoe fueled run in the third quarter?
I think it was just like he was able to hit big shot after big shot, but it wasn't even his offense that really stood out to me. It was that his defense. They did the same exact defense they did the last game, where they just sat on Harden's left hip a little bit behind him, and Harden still could not adjust and make plays off of it. Like, that, I think, was the biggest part, was his continued just defensive genius on Harden and just slowing him down and forcing Harden to, I think Harden took like 29 shots and only scored 26 points. Like, it was like, that was the kind of thing that really stood out to me. I mean, him hitting a couple threes in a row and him getting layups, I mean, that was awesome, but it was the defense in particular that stood out to me. And I think it was also impressive was him and George Hill and Connaughton. They were just getting steals in the backcourt left and right. It seemed like, every 4 or 5 possessions, they ended up getting a steal in the backcourt of Houston. And that was also something that wasn't according to plan. So just the idea that Bledsoe kind of just, is he a secret defensive mastermind? Because this is now twice that he's kind of just gone off the rails and did his own thing and has paid off.
I'm not sure if it's so much it's off the rails. I'm sure he like tells Coach Bud before the game, like it's not like it goes out there and say, yeah, okay, Coach, yeah, I'm just gonna do my own thing. I doubt that's it, but I agree that it's impressive that he's able to kind of not even on the fly, but come up with the general idea of how he wants to defend a certain, especially when another team has a guard that's, the end all be all, like James Harden, to come up with a plan like, okay, this is how it's going to work, and run it by Coach Bud and kind of convince him. Because as we've seen in, I think, recent articles, Coach Bud isn't the easiest guy to necessarily convince to change the plans on. And I think the Rockets game was probably, just besides Eric Bledsoe, all the other starters kind of had relatively ho-hum games. And so this last Atlanta Hawks game and then the Rockets game as well is just a continual testament to how deep the team is, because the Rockets, once you get past their top 5, they're grasping at straws for any sort of help off the bench, as they have been all season. They gotten by with Harden kind of leading the way, but the fact that you're able to have so many guys come off the bench, especially Pat Connaughton having an awesome game, but it could be any certain guy any given night, and that gives you a lot of freedom to kind of mix and match and move things around depending on how people are playing, which is a nice option to have.
Yeah, and I think an underrated part of that game is, some of the like criticism around Bud has kind of been, and it sort of seemed a little warranted when he seemed like unwilling to move from his defensive strategy early in the season. But we've seen him move away as like it, some accusations that he can't really adjust in the middle of a playoff series, right? Like that he might have trouble adapting to what's going on. But I feel like when you're doing stuff, some of the extreme level interesting stuff that he does, like shade Harden to that degree. And obviously that was Eric Bledsoe who reportedly really pushed it to the maximum umpteenth degree in that game. But, Bud had to have a game plan for that. And these sort of like single game plans that feels like we didn't necessarily have in years past. And maybe that's just like me feeling hurt that we didn't have a great coach or whatever. And like, this is just what the rest of the league knows what it's like. But it does feel like, like we have, like it's just seeing these single game adjustments that happen that Bud has instituted and tried to really make work for this team. Give me a lot more hope for what might happen in the playoffs when we face off a team, and maybe if they try to do something one way and we need to adjust going from one game to the other.
So are you trying to say Jason Kidd wasn't in, like, he didn't want to run a 2-3 zone the entire time he was the coach of the team? I'm sure he died every single game like, hey, Joe, is this the game we can run the 2-3 zone? Is this it? Or
well, yeah, I'm going to ask Sean Sweeney, and Sean Sweeney's like,
oh yeah, sorry, my bad, Sean. Sean, can we run the 2-3 zone this time? Or no? Okay, never mind.
I was talking with my boss, who's a Rockets fan, but he also went to Cal, and
wow.
I know. Well, so it worked out really well because Cal was looking for a coach, so I got to sort of share with him. He was like, "Yeah, maybe Jason Kidd could get hired," and I was like, "Yeah." I don't really know if you want him. And he was like, well, why? And then I like rattled off like all of the angst and hate that Bucks fans have had for years against Jason Kidd on the car ride to lunch. So he quickly learned that Jason Kidd might not have been the smartest hire there at Cal. So thankfully they didn't have to get him. But
could you imagine him recruiting players, just like how much of a mess that would have been?
It would be, all it would be in-home visits, and he challenged the player to one-on-ones and first to fives. That would be the entire recruiting strategy. You've heard it here first.
And it would also be like, okay, do you think you're better than this player who I'm also recruiting?
That would be amazing when he brings in the recruiting class every time and is like, all right, guys, who's the leader of this recruiting class? Just over and over. I bet he like would make them in practice where they're like scout.com ranking their number of stars like on their jersey or whatever. He would probably make them do that to try and see who's the best. Well, the other defensive thing that's obviously really amazing about this Bucks team, and they are really well calibrated to try and beat this Rockets team, even though they allow the most threes in the league, is the fact that they hold up so well at the rim. And so the interesting thing about that game is that, it's just over and over. James Harden certainly could get to the paint, but he's immediately meeting Giannis and Brook and trying to throw these insane floaters over their outstretched arms. I mean, that's been a shot that Harden's really, really mastered, but he's doing that as opposed to trying to go up for contact, and maybe he'll get blocks. So he only ends up with 5 free throw attempts on the game. But just Riley running into that level of defense right at the rim and trying to get it over that length had to be an incredible part of why he struggled for the night.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. And we've seen it like game after game. And even today against the Hawks, like it was kind of a similar story. They got a lot of putbacks just because like the Bonzi, Colson, Ersan Ilyasova front line is not going to end up being the greatest rebounding tandem in the league. But I think it's such a facet of the way this team plays, or like the approach that even if you're a guard who's able to get into the paint with relative ease, the fact that you then have at the end of all of the movement you have to do to get there, you have a couple of dudes with like 7-foot long wingspans, like standing there with their arms straight up and then it's not even just that, but the fact that the defense continues to like be able to fluidly move and kind of crash over onto James Harden or whoever the guy happens to be, so that all of a sudden he's pushing into the paint and everybody crashes, but stays, in a way that doesn't give Harden any other choice but to try to go 1v4 within like a 5-foot radius, which even for a guy like Harden is a tough task to answer to. So I think the fact that you've had 2 games where even though Harden scored quite a bit, he's struggled in certain ways is a positive, especially when we might face teams in the playoffs where it's like, okay, we're going to have to try and get broken down by this one single guy or like these select guys. And you have the ability to continue to do that. And you've had a track record of doing that as well.
Trekkard. I love that. That's so
A Trekkard. You have a Trekkard of it.
I like it.
Yep. Kyle, the only other thing I did want to mention is that we've talked before about Eric Bledsoe and his value as potentially the defensive tempo and tone setter, and this I think it's just been absolutely most pronounced in these both of these Rockets games. And when he is trailing James Harden, and Harden is like, it seems like he doesn't have eyes in the back of his head anymore, and he's like fearing the fact that Bledsoe's behind him. And the couple of times he just swatted his shot right out of there. I think that both obviously Giannis can be the tone setter all game, but Chris, I think, certainly brings that level of energy and tone setting on the offensive end. But come playoff time, I think we're really going to need Bledsoe to bring that same sort of energy on the defensive end, right?
I think so. And I think he's going to prove that, last year was just a weird fluke of a performance, and, he just didn't have it. I think defensively he's going to be the key, especially depending on who they match up against, whether it's Miami or the Nets or Charlotte or Orlando. Like, a couple of those teams have point guards that Bledsoe's really going to want to just make sure and clamp down and not let them have any moment. And, he's considering he's better than all of those other point guards. I think it's going to happen. So I think he can do it. I'm confident in it. And, like I said, I think he has some defensive mastermind in him that he's going to see what's going on and he can make adjustments if needed.
And I think just one more point on Bledsoe as well. I think just thinking about him in general and the way that he's worked within Bud's system, we've seen, at least on the offensive end, his usage rate and his turnover rates have dropped a significant couple of percentage points since, even just last year, his just averages over the past 3 or 4 seasons. So he's still effective on offense without having to have everything kind of run through him or having a, unmanageable load. And I think that'll help so that he's not focusing I have to answer for everything or be a real standout on offense. I can kind of focus a little bit more defensively and, expend more energy, because the way the offensive system works is more qualitative. Giannis is awesome. Chris is kind of rounding into form as well. So I think throughout the season, Bud is probably focused on, okay, you're going to have a third role. It's still going to be important, but it's going to be set up in a way that you're not expending all your energy offensively, and then you're not able to bring it what we know you can bring on the defensive end. So I'm curious how that's going to play out in the playoffs round after round. But I think if that can kind of stay with the way it's been all season, that bodes well for the way the Bucks should play.
All right, guys. Any other main points either of you wanted to make about the past week before we shift ahead and look ahead into what's coming up?
Not particularly. How many games are we away from locking up the first seed?
2
games. Yeah, it's I've been kind of looking at the standings a little bit. There's still so much chaos that could happen, seeds 4 through 10, I think, just because everything's so close. So it should be a really fun end of the season. I'm not sure. Hopefully, once the Bucks clinch it, we're going to get a lot of regular Tim Frazier 48-minute performances. So I doubt today is a one-off, but yeah, no, I think that's really the only thing to circle here heading on out.
Yeah, I agree. And it seems and the Bucks are also really close to locking up, fingers crossed, should they get to the NBA Finals, home court for the NBA Finals, regardless of whether they have home court over Toronto or not, with both Golden State at Denver sitting right at 51 wins. So I think they only need one more win to get there, based on how many games are left. So that's a great sign too. And it seems like the 8th seed in the East is going to come right down to the wire, right, Kyle?
Yeah, I would look to see who's 8th in the East, but I'm sure that's going to change 5 minutes later. It's interesting between, I think it's places 6 through 10. All of the teams are 2.5 games. That's the only thing that separates them. So I don't think Charlotte's going to have enough of a run to make it. So it's kind of just depending on, can Orlando or Miami, or it's Orlando, Miami, Brooklyn, how they're going to kind of battle out, because I think Detroit is going to feel relatively safe, but those other teams, it's going to be exciting. So I hope the Bucks can just clinch home court on Monday, and then I can just kick my feet up and scoreboard watch the rest of the week.
Do you guys think they're going to get to 60 wins? They're going to need to win 4 out of the last 5 to get there, but do you think they'll be able to do it? Do you think they care to do it? Do they even, once they lock up the first seed, they're whatever, Tim Frazier?
Yeah, I don't think they'll care. I don't think they'll care to do it if they already get the 1 seed. I think they will, but I don't think they care.
Okay.
I think they'll get there. They have Brooklyn twice. They're going to want to beat Atlanta next week for sure.
They might get Philly without Embiid.
What are the odds that they try to we'll talk about this when we talk about the week ahead. What are the odds they run out the exact same lineup for the Atlanta game at home? 120% or 1000%?
I'd be so mad if I bought tickets for that game. Like, what is this?
Well, but what is this? But also, like, you bought tickets for like a really late season Atlanta Hawks Bucks game. Like, you're not expecting them to be running out the starting lineup.
You're getting what you paid for. You're getting what you paid for sure.
Yeah. Well, you can just explore the beautiful Fiserv Forum that game.
There we go.
All right. Let's move on to a more somber note. We found out this past week that Dante DiVincenzo, Lord and Savior of the Brew Hoop podcast, will be done for the season. He shelved that heel bursitis. Just couldn't kick it, man. He is going to be out for the season, and according to Malika Andrews, who follows the team, sources told them last Tuesday that Dante DiVincenzo is out for the year. He's supposed to make a full recovery in the offseason, but guys, let's turn Dante's Inferno this week into a moment of silence. All right, that's been Dante's Inferno.
I had to fight everything not to laugh right there. I had my hand over my mouth because it's so ridiculous.
Oh God! All right. Well, any just closing thoughts, since we obviously won't really have the segment for the rest of the season. Any closing thoughts that we want to have on Dante's? I would say, too sadly truncated season.
He did stuff. That's what I'll remember him for this year. Is he did stuff. I'll give him credit. He went from like, was it our very first podcast together talking about the Dante DiVincenzo pick?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I remember I was not confident in the selection. I was more confident in DJ Wilson coming into the season than Dante DiVincenzo. So I guess credit to him for doing stuff and making me think that there's still a viable NBA player somewhere in there, and hopefully they don't have to amputate his foot.
Kyle, anything else beyond hopefully they don't amputate Dante DiVincenzo?
You have a higher note to end on than that?
Sorry, I was starting my candlelight vigil, so
didn't mean to ruin the ceremony. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. I was pretty positive on Dante going into the season and after drafting him. Like, I didn't think he was going to be like, a starter, like this like key guy off the bench, but I figured he'd show kind of like what you said, just doing stuff, and he did show that he can play in the NBA. And I think if he can just increase his shooting, then he's going to be a really valuable piece for a bench guy. But I'm glad he at least wasn't a bust. It made me feel better. I kind of feel justified in saying he was going to be fine. So yeah, I'm going to go back to this candlelight vigil. So
put the banner up. Dante DiVincenzo's 2018-2019 season wasn't a bust. Put it up in the Fiserv Forum.
Considering the last couple of years, the Bucks first round pick, their rookie years have been abysmal. That's good.
It's true.
Yeah, I feel fine about it. I didn't realize that he also did a segment on the Jump about it, with Dante out for the season. How concerned should Bucks fans be after another injury? All right. Well, that's sad to hear that Dante's out, but moving on to bigger and better things. So we talked a little bit about the playoff seeding already. So let's move right into talking about the week ahead. So Monday, the Bucks will take on the Brooklyn Nets, April Fool's Day, of course. And then on Thursday, they head to Philadelphia, take on the 76ers. Saturday, they get the Brooklyn Nets once again. And then next Sunday, as we already discussed, they're taking on the Atlanta Hawks late at the Fiserv Forum. Let's dive a little deeper before we do our predictions on how the Bucks will do that week for that 76ers game. Riley, what's something that you're going to be looking for that one after the really big Sunday matchup between the Bucks and Sixers that went the Sixers' way a couple weeks ago?
That's a good question. I guess if I was to choose one thing, it's got to be the Giannis versus Ben Simmons matchup, right? Like, can we top he's an effing baby? Because there a way we can get over the top from that on national TV again? No, I think it'll just be, how, just because the previous previous 76ers game is so fresh in our minds, like what kind of tangible adjustments are there? Like we just talked about on this podcast, like Bud is willing to adjust and kind of make changes depending on the opponent. And when you're playing a team that you faced just a couple weeks ago, and there's every possibility, if the standings hold, that you might face them in the Eastern Conference Finals. If they end up getting there, are you going to change it all that much, or is it going to be like, okay, we're going to ride Giannis again, and then hope that the really weird outlier shooting games kind of return to normal? So I guess the focus would be Giannis versus either Embiid or Simmons, and then otherwise just the general shooting numbers. But I don't expect it to be like a real crazy, like, wow, this is really outside of the norm once again.
Yeah, Kyle, do you have anything? And just as a quick note, it looks like Joel Embiid is hurt. He's supposed to be reevaluated Thursday, so we probably won't know till that day whether he's going to play or not. So, does that change your idea at all for what to look for in that game, Kyle?
Not really. I still think the Bucks will win that game. It's just one of those where I think the matchup against Giannis, and I don't even know, like, are we 100% sure Giannis is even going to play that game?
No, he has to play that game.
I mean, you heard it first, everybody.
I mean, okay, all right, but yeah, I think it's just going to be kind of like what Riley said. I think the outlier shooting is going to be the key factor, because I think Milwaukee played well enough, I'd say Patrick's age, to get the win. It was just they couldn't hit the shots that they got, the shots like the looks, but they didn't get the fall, and I think that's going to change. Also, I don't think Philly's bench guys who like Mike Scott are going to suddenly hit threes out of nowhere. It's just not my feeling, and I feel like Chris is going to have to be due a big game, because he's going to start getting into that like playoff mindset. So I don't think it makes a difference whether Embiid plays or not. I think the only thing that affects it is how the Sixers approach guarding Giannis, because obviously Simmons can't guard Giannis, and Giannis made that perfectly clear in the post-game interview. He's like, yeah, Embiid guarding me is tough. Simmons guarding me, it's just a cakewalk.
Yeah, and the only reason I said he has to play is because I'll be at that game. So, and last year he didn't play. Last year he didn't play either, which was really tough to go to that game and see the Bucks get waxed, I think, by like 30 points.
And that was Jason Kidd's final game as a coach.
Hey, Adam, when you're in the stands at the away arena, what kind of fan are you? Are you a very vocal Bucks fan, or are you just kind of there for the ride and, try not to get ribbed too hard by other fans, or what's your approach?
I think I'm a pretty calm and collected guy. I mean, if there's another Bucks fan around me, I get pretty excited, but I don't like to be the guy that's going to throw it in everyone's face. I just find that fan to be really obnoxious. And if I was in a Bucks game and a 76ers fan was at the game, I would be annoyed to do that, and it would ruin my enjoyment of the game. That being said, I'm going with my Sixers fan roommate, and I'm going to shove it in his face the whole game whenever Giannis dunks on Ben Simmons. So I'm excited to do that, but I'm also open to changing my mindset. So if people want to tweet at me things I should yell in the stands, family friendly, please. It's at Adam R. Paris, or tweet at BrewHoop. Just let me know what sort of stuff I should be doing while I'm in enemy territory, to sort of maybe seed some sour little insurrection from the fans, and let them know that the Bucks are going to be taking down the Sixers in the playoffs should they meet up. Anything else you guys need me to do while I'm at that game to make sure that should I wear like a sign that says follow BrewHoop?
I mean, do that, and I don't know how you're going to be able to manage this, but find a way to tape Giannis's ankles. Tape the damn thing. If you can manage to sneak in and do that, great.
All right. Well, I'll see if I can go in and throw some tape down there for Yanni to put those on. But otherwise, I'll do my best to carry the banner for the Bucks and try and cheer them on while in enemy territory. Some of the Sixers fans can get a little rowdy, at least from past experience in games that I've gone to. So hopefully I didn't.
It's kind of weird. I just thought about it because Mitchell went to the Spurs game the Bucks lost. I don't know if Andrew went to. No, Andrew went and did coverage for us at the Clippers game, and they lost. So I'm a little concerned us going to games is not good for the health of the Bucks. Although Riley and I did go to the Minnesota one, and that was fine.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I just sorry guys, I had to leave for a second. No, I was gonna say in juxtaposition to your being the classy fan, I'm the worst fan in the stands. Like anytime the Bucks visit the Timberwolves, I am so obnoxious. I let it all out. I rib everybody around me. I try to call out the players, not like, obnoxiously like certain fans across the nation, but I try to be intelligent. Like when the Timberwolves or the Bucks are playing the Timberwolves, this is right after Jimmy Butler's "they can't win without me" situation was going on. So I was yelling about that. I was trying to encourage Jimmy. So I'm the exact opposite of you, Adam, but to each their own.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Well, maybe, who knows? Maybe I'll have a change of heart and I'll start to, as people know, my fandom has been the fans of the fire of my fandom has been newly risen from the ashes this year. So who knows? Maybe I'll be awful at this game. Really annoying.
Are you willing to run out onto the court and say and scream "Brew Hoop forever" before he takes you down? Or
yeah, I'm willing to get kicked out of this Sixers game for that's how dedicated I am to this.
Hopefully, for your sake, the Bucks win the championship, so your wager money can go towards your
yeah. Fingers crossed for that. Well, guys, I think that's going to do it for today's episode. Of course, as per usual, go to brewhoop.com for all the amazing content we have there. I'm sure there will be some great stuff following that Sixers game, the Nets game, every game that comes out. Make sure to follow at brewhoop on Twitter, and we will tune into another episode of the Brew Hoop podcast next week. Might come before that Hawks game because I don't feel like staying up till like 11:30 post that Hawks game, but we'll see. Regardless, thanks as always for listening, and we'll talk to you again next week.